Hello and welcome to our podcast on denotation and connotation. And these are some words that we use a lot in class when we're talking about word choice in our writing, and also when we're talking about detecting an author's bias in reading. Alright, so let's talk about what each one of these words actually means. The first one is denotation, and this is what a word is. And basically, the word, student, is what it describes. It describes someone who goes to school, someone who is learning. Another example, the word boy. It describes a male person, someone with certain chromosomes. It is a male, it is a boy. A job, the word job describes a profession, what somebody does for work. The point is that denotation of a word is what it is. There is no emotional loading on that word. It's just a neutral description of that item. When you see that word, you shouldn't necessarily feel any particular way. Boy describes a male person, girl, student. They just label some noun, some person, place, thing. It is just a labeling word. And so that is denotation. Now we need to contrast that, or show the opposite, with the idea of connotation. And this is what we call the emotional level of a word. And so usually we describe them just in terms of a positive connotation or a negative connotation, meaning that there's some emotional loading that goes with that specific word. So let's go back to our example of student. A person walks into a room, they are prepared for class. We would denote that person as student. It's just telling us that this is a person that is learning. There is no emotional loading, it just describes. Now, if we wanted to describe that person with a certain emotional loading and make them seem like the worst student we have ever had ever, this person threw scissors, this person was always late, this person was always cursing at us, we could say, okay, that is a bad student. Or we could use the connotation of devil or witch, perhaps, to truly show the emotional feel that we have for that particular student. So the word student denotes person who studies, but if you call that same person a devil, that adds some emotional loading to that description. Clearly, that's not a good thing. On the flip side, if a student walked in and this was the most perfect student ever, turned in work early, always took advantage of revisions, offered an apple every single day, and you wanted to put a very positive light on that student, you could call them an angel. And so those three words, student, devil, or angel, might all be labeling the same person. But depending on which word you use, there is different emotional loading attached. So whereas the bad student might be called a devil, the positive student might be called angel. And as a reader, we should be able to deduce what that does to our perception of that character. And so why do I need to know the difference between denotation, which just labels, and connotation, which adds some sort of deeper meaning to each word? When we're reading, this helps us to pick up the writer's bias or his or her perspective or point of view. If they are describing the Broncos as a team, that's quite different than describing the Broncos as the most amazing franchise in sporting history, and that is quite different than describing them as the lowlife of humanity. That's quite different. As a reader, we can see where the text is pointing our emotions toward. Combined with this, when we are writing, we want to make sure that we are finding the most perfect word for each situation and making sure that we are choosing words that truly say at a denotative level and a connotative level what we want them to say. Oftentimes we get in the rut of saying, oh yeah, well that was good. Yeah, there's many things that I have to do. Well, that's pretty vague. Things denotes that you have many items to accomplish, but are these tasks? Are these chores? Or are these opportunities? And each of those words, chores, tasks, things, and opportunities, all have different connotative levels. Some are very positive, such as opportunities, and some are clearly negative, like chores. We want opportunities. We don't want chores. And so each word, when we're writing, means more than just the 4 or 5 letters put together. We have to look at that connotation of each word. For example, you might have some pleasant words like calm, friend, truth, honest. Those are good words. I mean, they should create a positive image in the reader's head. But if those same things were described using adjectives like stormy or falsehood or unfinished, that's not necessarily a good connotation. And so when we're reading, we need to see how people are describing things. And when we're writing, we really want to find the best word for what we're trying to say. So when you're playing with language, trying to find that perfect word for the perfect situation, don't be afraid to combine words. Complete honesty. All right, great. A sweet friend. Or American cooperation. One would hope that that's a positive combination. Uncontrolled dishonesty. Yeah, that's not good. Not just to be an opponent, but to be a dirty opponent. Wow, that's horrible. So you're really moving toward those emotional loadings. And so not only can you just use, one word, but oftentimes you can combine two to really drive home your point. And so what is the connotation of the underlined phrase? Let's do a little bit of practice here. She walked up to him and smilingly killed him. Smiling seems to have a positive connotation, but killed is never good. So what's it mean if she smilingly killed him? Is it implying that she was happy when she took his life? What kind of smile is she being described with? Is it a happy, jokerish smile? Is it an ironic smile? And so that could go to further describe this situation. Money rained down from above. Okay, well, man, rained. Well, rain's pretty bad, and we don't really like rain, and down is usually seen as bad. But when money's raining down, all of a sudden you have two negatively connotated words, rain and down, seem to be making a positive image. Sure, I'd love for money to rain down on me. And so just how you play with words, how you combine them, can add some connotative or emotional depth. One thing to think about is the idea of context. Look at the 2 examples here. That's a lazy cat. Oh, cute, cuddly. I love lazy cats. You can snuggle with them. They're warm. They purr. They're soft and fuzzy. That's awesome. Lazy in that case seems to be a pretty positively connotated word. But then contrast that with the second example, which is that's a lazy man. Oh, lazy man, sits around on the sofa all day, has Cheetos stuck to his face. He doesn't do anything, not getting a job. He's getting fired out. That's lazy. The connotation of lazy with the cat, very positive. The connotation with lazy man, pretty negative. And so it's not just picking the word that fills in the blank, but it's using the word in the correct context to put forth the image that you as a writer are trying to put forth. And so take a second and ask yourself, feel free to pause the podcast as you go through this, but what's the difference between joy and pride? What's the difference between someone who feels anger and someone who feels rage? What's the difference between feeling boredom in a class and feeling despair? And so that's pretty much it. But just to review, denotation is a word that just labels something. It has no emotional loading on it. Somebody walks in the room to a classroom, we say, there is a student. That is a neutral description of that person walking through. There is a male, there is a female, there is a boy, there is a girl. But when we look at the connotation of a word and work at that connotative level, that adds emotion to it. And so to say, ooh, there's the devil, or there's an angel, that changes how we as readers perceive that character. And then as writers, when we choose certain words for certain instances, that really shapes how our audience will receive our writing. And again, the last thing to think about is just context. To say boy describes a male person, in most contexts, that just describes, a young man. But what if we were using the word boy to describe a full-grown man? He's being very boyish. Well, I don't know. Most full-grown men don't want to be called boys anymore. Or think back to Kill a Mockingbird. You get Tom Robinson, a full-grown, respectable community member, on the stand trying to explain himself in that trial against Mayella, and the opposing attorney keeps calling him boy. Well, what were you thinking, boy? What was on your mind, boy? He's not calling him a young man. Boy, in that particular context, the connotation, the loading of that word is extremely negative, offensive, racist even. So the terms we need to know: denotation, just a neutral word; connotation, an emotionally loaded word; and then the last part, just applying them to different contexts. I think if we can continue to practice at the reading end of seeing those words and how they're used, that will make us better readers. And I think if we can use those in our writing and finding that perfect word for the perfect situation, that will help us with our writing. So as always, bring in your notes to class, bring in your questions. If anything's unclear, please make sure you ask, and we will seek to clear that up for you. As always, thanks for listening, and we will see you in class. Thanks.